Keep running your mouth, and I'll make you regret it. Officer, I have done nothing wrong. I just need to understand why I was stopped, Celine responded. You were stopped because you're standing where you don't belong. Kane Ryder stepped forward and reached for her arm. In a single motion, her arm reflexively pulled back. That's resisting. Get on the ground and put your hands behind your back, he shouted. Celine's knees met the pavement. Ryder moved behind her and snapped the cuffs onto her wrists. What Officer Kane Ryder didn't understand was that those handcuffs had just triggered a call straight into the Pentagon. And that call may have just cost him everything. Call may have. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because the next story is one you cannot miss. The morning heat was already building. Celine Vargas had been running for a while. Her breathing was steady. Her footfall was even. Left, right, left. The same rhythm she had kept every morning since she was young, and a drill sergeant with a voice like gravel had told her that discipline wasn't something you felt. It was something you did. She had never forgotten that. She had never stopped running. She wore a white sleeveless tank top, black shorts, and pink running shoes that had logged more miles than most cars. Her long braids swung loose behind her with every stride, catching the early morning light. The small armband carrier was strapped to her left forearm, her phone and ID tucked inside it, snug against her skin. This was Magnolia Ridge Drive, a quiet street in Harlow Falls, Georgia, lined with oak trees and wide green lawns, and houses that cost more than most people made in years. Her mother, Hattie, had lived 3 blocks from here for a long time. Celine had grown up coming to this neighborhood. She knew every curve of this road. None of that had ever mattered before. She passed a pale blue house on her left. 2 stories, white shutters, a front porch with hanging flower baskets. A woman sat in a rocking chair on that porch. She looked older, white, in a housecoat, with a cup of something warm balanced on the armrest beside her. She wasn't reading. She wasn't looking at her phone. She was watching Celine. Celine noticed. She always noticed things. It was part of who she was. The woman's eyes tracked her like she was something that didn't belong here. Her brow pulled down slowly, the way people's faces move when they're deciding something. Celine kept her pace and kept her eyes forward. Behind her, she heard the sound of a chair scraping against wood. She ran another block. The oak trees threw long shadows across the road. A sprinkler kicked on somewhere. A dog barked twice and went quiet. Everything felt ordinary. Everything looked ordinary. Then a patrol car came around the corner. It slowed when it reached her, matched her pace. A white and blue Harlow Falls PD cruiser crawling alongside her on the empty street like it had all the time in the world. Celine kept running for 2 more steps, then slowed to a stop. She pulled out her earbuds. She turned to face the vehicle. The driver's door opened. A white officer stepped out. He was built like someone who spent a lot of time at the gym, with a jaw that was set just a little too hard. His right hand dropped to his belt the moment his feet hit the ground. Not to draw anything, just to rest there, just to make sure she saw it. His name tag read Ryder. Ma'am. His voice was flat, neutral in the way that wasn't actually neutral. We got a call about a suspicious person matching your description. Someone reported you casing vehicles in the neighborhood. Celine looked at him. Then she looked at the patrol car. A second officer sat in the passenger seat. Young. He had not gotten out of the car. He was looking straight ahead through the windshield, like the road in front of him was the most interesting thing he had ever seen. His name tag, visible through the glass, read, Croft. She looked back at Ryder. Casing vehicles, she said. That's what was reported. Celine kept her voice even. Calm. The same voice she used in briefing rooms when a general asked her a question, and she already knew the answer. What specific behavior was I reported doing? Ryder's jaw tightened. Just slightly, just enough. You match the description of, I heard what you said. She kept her tone polite, precise. I'm asking what behavior was reported. Was I looking into cars? Trying door handles? What exactly did the caller say I was doing? Ryder stared at her. The hand on his belt didn't move. The sprinkler somewhere behind her was still going. The street was still empty. There was nothing happening here. There was a woman in a white tank top and pink running shoes standing on a sidewalk in the early morning, asking a completely fair question. His eyes moved over her slowly. Down. Up. The way that wasn't about assessment. The way that was about something else entirely. I'm going to need you to provide some identification, he said. He had not answered her question. He was not going to answer her question. His hand stayed exactly where it was. Celine reached into her armband carrier slowly. She moved the way she had been trained to move in tense situations, deliberately, with no sudden motion, no reason to give anyone anything to point to later. Her fingers found her military ID, and she pulled it out, holding it flat in her open palm so Ryder could see it clearly before he even took a step toward her. He didn't look at it right away. He looked at her first. Then, like he was doing her a favor, he glanced down at the card. Celine Vargas, she said. I'm staying at my mother's house, 3 blocks east. I'm visiting my mother. I run this route every morning. Ryder took the ID, turned it over once, handed it back without a word. Behind him, Croft had still not moved from the passenger seat, still staring through that windshield, still acting like none of this was happening 6 feet away from him. Here's the thing, Ryder said, hooking his thumbs into his belt. You got people in this neighborhood feeling uncomfortable. That's a problem. I'm running, Celine said, on a public street. I understand that. Do you? His eyes went flat. Watch your tone. Celine looked at him steadily. Her braids shifted in the light morning breeze. Her breathing had fully settled from the run. She was the calmest person on this street, and they both knew it. And something about that seemed to bother him more than anything else. I'm asking a straightforward question, she said. What did the caller report me doing? Not what I look like, what I was doing. You need to stop pressing me on that. I need to understand why I was stopped. You were stopped, Ryder said, his voice dropping half a register. Because someone in this neighborhood didn't recognize you and felt unsafe. That's enough. Celine let that sit in the air for a moment. She wanted to be sure she had heard it correctly. Someone felt unsafe. A woman running in broad daylight on a public street in workout clothes. That was enough. Keep your hands where I can see them, Ryder said. They are where you can see them. Don't get smart with me. I'm not being smart. I'm being accurate. Something shifted behind his eyes. A door closing. She recognized it immediately. She had seen it in the field before, in the faces of people who had decided that the conversation was over and only the outcome remained. He took one step toward her. Celine's hand went up slightly. An instinctive open-palmed gesture, the universal body language for wait. I'd like to know if I'm being detained or if I'm free to go, she said. Put your hands down. I'm not. I said put your hands down. Louder now. His voice had changed. It had an edge that hadn't been there moments ago, sharp and deliberate. The hand that had been resting on his belt moved. He reached for her arm. Celine stepped back. One step. That was all. One automatic, fully human, completely instinctive step backward when a man she did not know reached for her without warning. Then his hand shot forward and closed around her wrist. Her body reacted before her mind could stop it. Years of close-quarters combat training didn't live in her head. It lived in her muscles, her tendons, the deep automatic wiring of someone who had been grabbed in training exercises hundreds of times and taught every single time to pull away and create distance. Her arm snapped back toward her body. A single, sharp pull. Less than a second. The kind of motion that was as involuntary as blinking. She caught herself immediately. Went completely still. Hands open. Body straight. But it was already too late. "She's resisting!" Ryder's voice shot up the street like a signal flare. "She's resisting! Croft, get out here!" The passenger door flew open. Everything happened fast after that. Ryder's hand closed around her wrist again, harder this time. She did not pull away. She went absolutely still. But it didn't matter anymore. The script had already been written. The word had already been said, and it was the only thing that was going to be remembered about this morning. Not the grab, not the reflex. Just the word. He spun her. Her shoulder hit first, then her knees, and then she was on the ground. The asphalt was hot and rough against her skin through her white tank top. Her braids splayed out around her face. Her pink shoes scraped against the road as Ryder pulled her arms behind her back, and the cuffs clicked into place. 1, then 2. Croft stood 2 feet away. He was looking at the ground. From somewhere down at the street, a man with a leaf blower had gone completely silent. Celine could feel him watching. She could feel the whole street watching from behind curtains and through cracked blinds, and not one person was going to come outside. She lay with her cheek an inch from the hot asphalt of Magnolia Ridge Drive. Her breathing was controlled. Her face was still. Her eyes were open and focused and clear. She was already thinking about what came next. The holding cell smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Celine sat on the metal bench with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Her braids were still loose from the run. There was a scrape on her left knee from the asphalt that had dried to a thin, dark line. Her white tank top had a gray smudge across the shoulder where the road had met her first. She had not said a single word during processing. Not when they walked her through the front doors. Not when a heavy-set officer with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose typed her information into a computer with 2 fingers, slowly, like time was something he had plenty of. Not when they placed her belongings into a clear plastic bag, her phone, her armband carrier, and her military ID, and sealed it with a zip tie right in front of her. She watched the ID disappear into the bag. She kept her face still. The charge sheet said resisting arrest, obstruction of a law enforcement officer. The officer who typed it didn't look at her once, like she was just another form to fill out. Just another morning in Harlow Falls. The cell door closed with a heavy metallic clank. Celine sat down on the bench and looked at the wall across from her. Concrete block painted over so many times the surface was slightly bumpy. A small rectangular window near the ceiling let in a strip of pale morning light. She could hear phones ringing somewhere down the hall, a radio playing low. The ordinary sounds of a building that processed human beings like paperwork. She breathed in, breathed out. Her mind was already moving. A short while passed before a young officer appeared at the cell door. He was young, with a patchy attempt at a beard, and the look of someone who was still figuring out whether this job was what he thought it would be. His name tag read Grant. "You get 1 call," he said. He was trying to sound official about it. He almost managed it. Celine stood up. "I need you to dial a number for me." Grant led her to a phone mounted on the wall near the processing desk. He stood a few feet back, arms crossed, trying to look like he wasn't paying attention. Celine looked at the phone for a half-second, then began to recite the number from memory. She had not dialed it in months. She had not forgotten a single digit. Grant dialed. It rang twice. Department of Defense, Office of the Assistant Secretary. How may I direct your call? The voice on the line was crisp, professional, completely routine. To the person on the other end, this was just another call in a long morning of calls. Celine's voice, when she spoke, was just as crisp, just as steady. This is Major Celine Vargas, Military Intelligence Corps, currently assigned to Fort Gilliam, Georgia. Badge number Foxtrot Niner, 74 Alpha. I hold a top-secret dark SCI clearance, current and active. I am calling from the Harlow Falls Police Department holding facility in Harlow Falls, Georgia, where I have been detained. She paused for exactly one beat. I need to be connected to General Marcus Hale's office. This call needs to be logged and time-stamped. Please confirm you are doing so. A brief pause on the line. Then, one moment, Major. Grant had stopped pretending not to listen. He was standing completely still, his arms no longer crossed, his eyes fixed on the side of Celine's face, with the expression of someone who had just realized the ground under their feet was not quite as solid as they thought. Celine did not look at him. She kept her eyes level and her voice even as Hale's aide came on the line. She stated everything: the time of the stop, the name on the officer's badge, the sequence of events in order without editorializing, the charges as written on the sheet, where she was, what she needed. She spoke for less than a few minutes and did not waste a single word. When she finished, she thanked the aide, confirmed the call reference number, and hung up. She turned back toward the cell without looking at Grant. She had been sitting on the metal bench for only a short while when she heard it. A sharp knock, a raised voice somewhere down the hall, the sound of a door being opened faster than usual. Then, footsteps. Quick ones. Sergeant Reginald Voss appeared at the far end of the processing room. He was holding Celine's booking sheet in his hand. His face was the color of old chalk. He read it again. Like reading it a second time might change what it said. It didn't. Hours passed. Celine had not moved from the bench. She had not asked for anything. She had not complained about the scrape on her knee or the smudge on her tank top, or the fact that the strip of morning light through the high window had shifted and grown as the morning turned toward afternoon. She sat with her back straight and her hands folded, and she waited with the patience of someone who had learned a long time ago that waiting was its own form of power. Then she heard the footsteps, different from Grant's, heavier, slower. The footsteps of a man who was choosing his pace deliberately. Chief Harlan Crow appeared at the cell door. He was broad-shouldered, with silver hair cut close, and a face that had probably been handsome years ago and had since settled into something more useful, authoritative, trustworthy, the kind of face that looked good behind a podium. He was in full uniform. He had the careful, warm expression of a man who had been in damage control situations before and was very, very good at them. He smiled when he saw her. Actually smiled. Major Vargas. His voice was smooth, practiced, like warm syrup poured slow. I am so sorry to keep you waiting. Please, come on out of there. The cell door was already opening. Celine stood. She straightened her tank top. She walked out of the cell and stopped in front of him and looked at him with an expression that gave nothing away. Crow clasped his hands in front of him like a man about to deliver a sermon. First, I want you to know that what happened this morning was a deeply regrettable miscommunication. Officer Ryder followed a call. Things escalated in a way that should not have happened, and I want to personally apologize on behalf of this department. Celine said nothing. She let him keep going. We take situations like this extremely seriously. He nodded as he said it, like the nodding made it more true. Officer Ryder has been spoken to. I want to assure you that this is not who we are as a department. We serve this entire community, and that absolutely includes you. He paused there, leaving space for her to say something gracious, something that would make this easier. Celine looked at him for a long moment. This is not who we are, she repeated back to him. Quietly. No heat in it. Crow blinked. That's correct. This does not reflect— You said that twice now. She kept her voice level. This is not who you are. She tilted her head slightly. Yes, it is. The warmth in his face didn't disappear. Men like Crow didn't let their faces do what they were actually feeling. But something behind his eyes shifted. A small, cold recalibration. I understand you're upset, he said. I'm not upset, Celine said. I'm clear. She held his gaze for one more beat. Then she turned to the processing desk, where Grant was already holding out her clear plastic bag with the zip tie cut open. She took it. She removed her military ID first and clipped it back onto her armband carrier, snapping it into place with a small, clean sound. Then her phone, then the carrier itself strapped back onto her left forearm where it belonged. She walked out of the Harlow Falls Police Department without looking back. The drive to Hattie's house took only a few minutes. Hattie Sopa opened the front door before Celine even reached the porch steps. She had clearly been watching from the window. She was older, small and sharp-eyed, wearing her house dress and the expression of a woman who had been praying hard for hours and was not entirely finished. Baby. Her voice broke on the single word. She pulled Celine into a hug that was tighter than her frame suggested she was capable of. Celine let herself be held, just for a moment, just for long enough to feel her mother's heartbeat against her own, and remember that this was what she was protecting. Then Hattie pulled back, held Celine's face in both hands, looked her over from head to toe, and switched cleanly from relief to fury. That scrape, she pointed at Celine's knee. That is from their pavement. Mama, don't mama me. She was already moving toward the kitchen. Sit down. I'm making tea, and then I am going to tell you exactly what the Lord has planned for men like that. Because I have had hours to think about it, and I have some very specific thoughts. Celine sat on the porch steps and listened to her mother move around the kitchen. The tap running, the cabinet opening, the soft clatter of 2 cups being pulled from the shelf. The afternoon had settled into something almost peaceful. Cicadas in the oak tree, a lawnmower 2 streets over. The ordinary sounds of a quiet neighborhood. Hattie came back with 2 cups of sweet tea and sat beside her daughter on the porch steps. She handed Celine her cup and rested her free hand over Celine's and held it there. The evening light was coming in soft and golden across the lawn. Celine took a slow sip of tea. Her record was clean. Hale's office had the account. Ryder had been spoken to. She had walked out. Maybe, just maybe, the worst of it was already behind her. She let herself believe that. Just for now. Just for this moment. With her mother's hand warm over hers, and the tea sweet on her tongue, and the evening coming in gold across the grass. She let herself believe it. The sweet tea was still cold when Celine's phone lit up. She was sitting in Hattie's living room, legs stretched out on the couch, her knee cleaned and bandaged where Hattie had fussed over the asphalt scrape with antiseptic and quiet fury. The evening news was on the television, but the volume was low. Hattie had fallen into a light doze in the armchair across the room, her reading glasses still on, a church newsletter folded in her lap. Celine looked at her phone. A news notification from the Harlow Falls Gazette sat on her screen. She tapped it. The headline read, "Neighborhood incident with police draws scrutiny. Department stands by officer's actions." She read it once. Then she read it again. Then she pressed play on the embedded video. Body camera footage. Ryder's perspective, slightly tilted. The timestamp in the corner. She watched it carefully. It began mid-conversation, after she had already handed over her ID, after she had already answered every question he had bothered to ask. The clip picked up at the moment she stepped back, her single step, her arm pulling reflexively from his grip, then the ground coming up fast as he forced her down. It ended there, clean cut. Nothing before. Nothing about the reach. Nothing about his hand closing around her wrist without warning. Seconds of footage that told exactly the story someone wanted it to tell. Celine set the phone face up on the cushion beside her and stared at the ceiling. Hattie's slow, steady breathing filled the quiet room. The news anchor on the television was talking about something else entirely. Weather. A local fundraiser. Like nothing had happened today on Magnolia Ridge Drive. She picked the phone back up and read the article. Chief Crow had provided a statement. It described the encounter as a routine response to a community welfare call that escalated due to the subject's non-compliance. The department, Crow said, had reviewed the body camera and found that Officer Ryder had acted within established protocols. There was one quoted line from an unnamed department spokesperson at the very bottom of the article. The safety of all Harlow Falls residents remains our top priority. Celine put the phone down. She did not sleep well that night. By the next morning, it had spread. She sat at Hattie's kitchen table with her coffee and watched it happen in real time. A regional radio station out of Atlanta had picked up the clip. Their framing: woman resists officers during routine stop, claims racial harassment. The comments on the Gazette's post had filled overnight. She read enough of them to understand what she was dealing with, and then stopped reading. Reading more would not help her. Hattie came into the kitchen, took one look at Celine's face, and poured herself a cup of coffee without asking any questions. She sat across the table and waited. They edited the footage, Celine said. Hattie wrapped both hands around her cup. Of course they did. It starts after everything that mattered already happened. Hattie sipped her coffee. And who put that clip out there? Celine looked at her. Crow. Hattie nodded slowly, like this confirmed something she had already known. That man moved fast. He moved last night, Celine said, before I could say a single word publicly. She turned her phone face down on the table. He wrote the story first. That afternoon, a certified letter arrived at Hattie's front door. Celine signed for it, brought it inside, and opened it at the kitchen table. Official Harlow Falls PD letterhead. Voss's signature at the bottom. A supplemental incident report, 3 paragraphs long, corroborating every detail of Ryder's account. No mention of the initial grab, no mention of the wrist. Clean, neat, and entirely false. Attached to it was a formal notice, the charge of resisting arrest had been officially refiled. Celine read it twice, folded it back along its creases, set it on the table. She called Hale's office. His aide picked up on the second ring. Celine explained the refiled charges, the edited footage, Voss's supplemental report. She laid it out clearly, the way she laid everything out. Then she asked the question she already knew the answer to. The aide was quiet for a moment. Then, carefully and professionally, she confirmed it. The Department of Defense could not intervene in the local criminal proceeding. This was outside their jurisdiction. General Hale was aware of the situation and monitoring it closely, but the department's hands were tied. "I understand," Celine said. "Thank you." She ended the call. She placed her phone face down on Hattie's kitchen table. The certified letter sat beside it. Outside, a car passed slowly on the street. The refrigerator hummed. Hattie stood in the doorway with her arms folded gently across her chest, watching her daughter. Celine looked at her hands flat on the table. She was going to have to build every single piece of this herself. No cavalry, no rank pulling doors open from above. Just her, the truth, and whatever she could construct from it. She reached across the table, picked up her phone, and turned it face up. Time to get to work. Celine was up before sunrise. She had not needed an alarm. She rarely did. Her body kept its own schedule. Hours of rest, eyes open, feet on the floor. It was a habit the Army had built into her so deep it had become indistinguishable from who she was. She made coffee. She pulled out a fresh legal pad from the small office supply bag she had bought the evening before at the drugstore 2 blocks from Hattie's house. She uncapped a pen. She sat down at the kitchen table in the gray pre-dawn quiet. And she did what she had been trained to do when facing an adversary with more resources, more time, and more institutional cover than she had. She started from zero. She built up. The first page of the legal pad became a timeline. Every moment from Magnolia Ridge Drive written out in precise chronological order. Times, locations, exact words where she remembered them. Physical actions in sequence. She had been trained to document. She did it now with the same care she would give an intelligence report that was going to cross a general's desk. The second page. Names. Ryder. Voss. Crow. Croft. Grant. The woman on the porch. Every person who had been present. Every person who had made a decision. The third page. What she needed. Evidence. Witnesses. Legal representation. Ryder's history. That last item she underlined twice. The public records request took her time to draft correctly. She had done enough legal writing in her military career to know how to make a request specific enough to get real documents and broad enough not to miss anything important. She filed it electronically with the Harlow Falls PD Records Division early in the morning, requesting Officer Kane Ryder's complete complaint and disciplinary history for his full tenure with the department. Then she laced up her pink running shoes and went to work on the second item. Witnesses. It took her several evenings. She was methodical about it. She did not knock on doors randomly. She watched first. Who walked their dogs in the evening? Who sat on their porches? Who moved through the neighborhood with the slightly guarded posture of someone who had learned to keep their eyes down? She introduced herself simply. Her name, her mother's address, why she was here. She did not lead with what had happened to her. She asked questions, and she listened. By the third evening, she had 5 accounts. Mario, older, who had been stopped twice by Ryder in recent months while walking to the bus stop 2 blocks from his house. Each time Ryder had told him he matched the description of someone reported in the area. Mario had never filed a complaint. "I got grandkids," he told Celine at his front door, his voice low. "I can't afford to be on that man's radar." Tamara, who had been questioned in a grocery store parking lot while loading bags into her car. Ryder had told her the vehicle she was driving had been flagged. It had not been flagged. She had the paperwork to prove it. She had not reported it either. "What's the point?" she said. She said it the way people say things they have been saying for a long time. 3 more. Different faces. Different details. Same shape. The same officer. The same tone. The same outcome. Nothing reported. Nothing documented. Nothing done. Each of them had absorbed what happened and moved on, because the alternative had seemed worse. Celine wrote everything down. She thanked each of them. She did not make promises she could not keep. That night, she called the number her JAG office contact had given her. Vivian Cross answered on the second ring. Her voice was sharp and professional and moved fast. The voice of someone whose mind was always slightly ahead of the conversation. Celine introduced herself, gave her rank and current situation in 2 sentences, and then laid out everything. The arrest, the edited footage, the refiled charges, Crow's media strategy, Voss's supplemental report, the 5 neighborhood accounts in exactly the order it had happened. Vivian did not interrupt once. When Celine finished, there was a pause. Not the pause of someone deciding whether they were interested. The pause of someone who had just heard something they had been waiting a long time to hear. "I've had a file on the Harlow Falls PD for years," Vivian said. "I've been waiting for the right person to walk through the door." Another pause. "Major Vargas, I've been waiting for you. Can you take the case?" Celine asked. "I'm already on it," Vivian said. "Tonight." Celine set her pen down on the legal pad. Outside, Hattie's street was dark and quiet. She looked at the pages she had filled since before sunrise. The timeline, the names, the witness accounts, the list of what she still needed. It was a start, a real one. For the first time since the asphalt of Magnolia Ridge Drive, she felt the faint, careful return of something that felt like momentum. Vivian Cross did not waste mornings. By early the next day after she took the case, she had already sent Celine a 3-page intake document, a signed retainer, and a list of items she needed gathered within the week. Celine printed everything at the library 2 blocks from Hattie's house and had half the list completed before lunch. They were moving. That felt important. What neither of them fully understood yet was that Crow was already moving faster. The first sign came through Vivian. She called Celine just after midday, her voice still professional, but with a new tightness underneath it. The city's legal department had filed a motion that morning to restrict the release of departmental personnel records, citing an ongoing internal review of the incident. The same records Celine had formally requested days ago. The motion didn't deny the request outright. That would have been too visible. It simply buried it under procedure. Reviews took time. Time was the weapon. "How long does the motion buy them?" Celine asked. "Months minimum," Vivian said. "Possibly longer." Celine wrote it down on her legal pad, circled it, kept going. The second sign came days later through the local news. The Harlow Falls City Council held a regular session. Celine watched the live stream on her laptop at Hattie's kitchen table. Agenda item near the end of the meeting, when most people had already stopped watching, was a resolution commending the Harlow Falls Police Department for its exemplary commitment to community-oriented policing and public safety. 6 of the 7 council members voted yes without discussion. The resolution passed in minutes. Hattie, watching over Celine's shoulder with her reading glasses on, made a quiet sound of disgust. 6 out of 7, Celine said. "All his," Hattie said. "Every one of them." Celine wrote that down too. The letter arrived at Vivian's Atlanta office later. Vivian forwarded it to Celine by email with a single line at the top. "Read this carefully." The letter was on the official letterhead of the Harlow Falls Business Cooperative, signed by its chairman, who was, Celine noted, also listed on the city's website and as a member of the police department's Community Advisory Board. The letter addressed Vivian directly. It described her involvement in the case as an outside escalation of what is fundamentally a resolved local matter, and suggested that continued legal pressure would be counterproductive to the community healing this city is committed to pursuing. It was polite, Every sentence was polite, and every sentence was a warning, dressed up in the language of concern. Celine stared at it on her screen for a long moment. Then she forwarded it back to Vivian with 3 words. Add it to the file, but the move that landed hardest didn't come from Crow directly. Celine found out about Croft on a morning when she tried his number for the 4th time. He had not returned any of her calls since the night of the refiled charges. She had not pushed. She understood the position he was in. This time, someone picked up. It was Croft. His voice was flat and careful, the voice of someone reading from a script they had recently been handed. "I can't talk to you," he said. "I gave my statement. It's on record. I can't say anything beyond that." "I know what you saw on that street," Celine said. Her voice was quiet, no pressure in it, just the truth stated plainly. "You were standing right there." A long silence. "I have a family," he said. Then he hung up. Celine set her phone on the table. She did not move for a moment. She thought about Croft's face on Magnolia Ridge Drive, the way he had looked at the ground the entire time. She thought about what it cost a person to watch something wrong happen and say nothing. She thought about what it cost them to keep saying nothing after that. She did not blame him, but she wrote his name on a fresh page of the legal pad and underlined it. Not as a source she had lost, as a thread she had not finished pulling. Vivienne called that evening with a full summary of Crow's multi-day counter-campaign. The record's motion, the council resolution, the cooperative's letter, Croft's signed supplemental statement. She laid it out methodically, like a general describing troop movements on a map. "He's running the standard playbook," Vivian said. "Delay the documents, control the local narrative, isolate the witnesses, make the plaintiff tired enough to settle for nothing." She paused. "He's done this before." "I know," Celine said. "He thinks he can outlast you." Celine looked at her legal pad. Pages of notes since that morning alone. Her pen was running low on ink. She made a mental note to buy another one tomorrow. "He's wrong," she said. Days had passed since Croft hung up the phone. Celine and Vivian had kept working. Vivian was building the legal framework in Atlanta. Celine was at Hattie's kitchen table every morning before sunrise, adding to her files, cross-referencing dates, tracking every public move Crow made. The work was steady. The momentum, while slow, was real. Then Crow found a different kind of weapon. Hattie was already up when the first call came. She was at the stove making breakfast, the radio on low, when the phone rang. Selena heard her mother answer it from the hallway, the warm, familiar way she always answered, her name like a greeting. Then a pause. Then the tone of Hattie's voice changed. Celine came into the kitchen. Hattie had her back to the stove, the spatula still in her hand, her brow pulled tight. She was listening more than talking. Her free hand had found the counter and was resting on it the way hands do when a person needs something solid. "No," Hattie said carefully. "That is not correct." Another pause. "I appreciate you asking me directly." "No, that is absolutely not correct." She said goodbye and hung up. She turned around. Her face had the controlled look of a woman who was not going to let herself be shaken in front of her child, even when her child was grown. "Who was that?" Celine asked. "Sister Pearl from the prayer group." Hattie set the spatula down. "She saw something online. She wanted to ask me before she said anything to anyone else." She looked at Celine steadily. She was asking whether it was true that you had been dishonorably discharged. Celine went very still. She's not the first one this morning, Hattie said quietly. Celine found it within minutes. A political blog out of Atlanta. The kind of site that had no masthead, no named editor, and a comment section that moved fast. The post had gone up sometime in the early hours of the morning. The headline read, "Questions surround record of woman at center of Harlow Falls police controversy." The sourcing was attributed to law enforcement officials familiar with the matter. The claims were specific enough to sound credible and vague enough to be impossible to immediately disprove. Celine's rank was described as unverified. Her record allegedly contained disciplinary flags, and her account of the arrest was characterized as inconsistent with available evidence. Every single word of it was a lie. Celine's sister Amara texted from Charlotte a short while later, a screenshot of the blog post, 3 question marks. Then, "Celine, what is this?" Celine called her immediately and spent time on the phone walking Amara through exactly what was real and what wasn't. Amara was upset in the way that people who love you get upset. Not at you, but near you. The fear coming out sideways as frustration. Celine was patient. She answered every question. She kept her voice level the entire time. After the call, she contacted her unit's public affairs liaison at Fort Gilliam and initiated a formal record correction request through military channels. The paperwork would take time. The truth always moved slower than the lie that was designed to replace it. By midday, Hattie had fielded several more calls from church friends. That night, Celine sat alone at the kitchen table. Hattie had gone to bed an hour ago after making Celine eat something. Rice and chicken, the food she had cooked for every hard moment of Celine's childhood, and kissing her on the top of her head, the way she had done when Celine was small. Celine had let her. She had eaten every bite. Now it was late, and the house was quiet, and the documents were spread across the table in front of her, and she let herself finally feel the full weight of it. The asphalt against her cheek, the specific sound the cuffs made. 2 small mechanical clicks that she could still hear if the room was quiet enough. Ryder's voice, flat and practiced, saying she's resisting before she had done a single thing wrong. Her military ID, disappearing into a plastic bag. She thought about the women who had faced this same thing. All of them. Everyone who had stood on a sidewalk, or sat in a patrol car, or been walked through a processing room without a Pentagon number in their memory. Without a general who picked up on the second ring. Without a clearance that made a desk officer go pale. She sat with that for a long time. Then she set it down deliberately. The way you set down something heavy that you have been carrying long enough. She picked up her pen. She reached for her phone. She did not call Hale's aide. She dialed the number Hale himself had given her the day she made Major, a number she had never used except once in a training exercise to confirm it was real. It rang twice. Celine. His voice was steady and awake, the voice of a man who did not seem surprised to hear from her late at night. "Talk to me." Hale listened to everything without interrupting once. Celine walked him through all of it. The records motion, the council resolution, the business cooperative's letter, Croft's signed supplemental statement, the smear campaign, Hattie fielding phone calls from church friends asking whether her daughter had been dishonorably discharged. She laid it out in the same clean sequential order she used for intelligence briefings. No editorializing, no emotion bleeding into the facts. Just the facts themselves lined up where anyone could see them clearly. When she finished, Hale was quiet for a moment. "They're running you down," he said. "That's the strategy. Not defeat you legally. Just drain you until you stop." "I know what they're doing." "Good." A pause. "So stop waiting for the civilian system to hand you something. You're an intelligence officer, Celine. Act like one." His voice was even, unhurried. "I can't move officially yet, but I can tell you this. You're already sitting on what you need. You just haven't dug deep enough yet." Another pause. "Dig." The line went quiet. Celine sat with the phone in her hand for a moment after he hung up. Then she set it face down on the table, pulled the legal pad toward her, and wrote one word at the top of a clean page: dig. She went to bed late. She was back at the table early. She made coffee. She pulled every document she had accumulated: the timeline, the witness notes, the city council records, the body of the records request she had filed nearly 2 weeks ago. That last item she stared at for a long moment. The city's legal department had filed a motion to restrict disclosure within days of her request. The motion cited an ongoing internal review. It had been designed to bury her request under procedural weight for months, but motions took time to process, and government offices had multiple clerks. Celine picked up her pen and began writing a follow-up inquiry. Not to the legal department, but directly to the records division clerk listed at the bottom of the original submission confirmation email. A junior-level position, the kind of role that received a lot of internal memos, but not always all of them. She sent it early in the morning. By mid-morning, a partial document package arrived in her email inbox. The covering note from the clerk, a young woman named Tricia, whose email signature included a small daisy icon, said simply, "Per your original request, please find the attached records available for release at this time. Additional materials remain under review." The clerk had processed what she could by routine. She had never been copied on the suppression memo. Nobody had thought to tell her to stop. Celine opened the attachments. Most of it was what she expected: standard incident logs, commendation letters, a use of force training certificate. She moved through it methodically, page by page, the way she had been taught to move through raw intelligence, not looking for what you expect to find, but staying open to what is actually there. She almost missed it. It was near the bottom of the third document, an internal affairs report from years earlier, formally structured, professionally written, specific in its allegations. It documented a pattern of racially disparate pedestrian stops conducted by Officer Kane Ryder over a period of months, with 3 specific incidents detailed with dates, locations, and witness accounts. The report had been completed, signed, submitted through proper channels, and then reclassified as unfounded. The reclassification signature was not the investigating officer's. Celine looked at it for a long time. It was Voss's signature. Dated 2 business days after the official record showed Crow approving Voss's promotion to sergeant. Her eyes moved to the top of the report, to the name in the investigating officer field. Officer J. Croft. Celine set her coffee cup down slowly. Croft had been young when he wrote this. A second-year officer who had seen something wrong and done exactly what he was supposed to do, documented it, filed it through the correct channels, signed his name to it, and Voss had buried it, handed Ryder his clean record back. Then, years later, assigned Croft as Ryder's partner. Close enough to be part of whatever happened next. Too compromised by the buried report to ever speak freely about what he knew. That was why he had stood at the car on Magnolia Ridge Drive and looked at the ground. He hadn't been indifferent. He had been trapped. Celine photographed every page of the report with her phone. Front, back, every margin. Then she opened a new email to Vivian, attached all of it, and typed one line. Found it. Her phone rang minutes later, Vivian's name on the screen. Celine picked up before the second ring. Vivian called early the next morning. "I filed it an hour ago," she said. "Emergency civil rights complaint, Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. I cited the earlier IA report, Voss's reclassification timeline, the direct connection to Ryder's conduct on Magnolia Ridge Drive, And the supplemental evidence from your neighborhood witnesses. Her voice had the controlled energy of someone who had been awake for hours. This is solid, Celine. This is the strongest filing I've made in years. Celine let herself feel it for exactly one moment. The weight of the past weeks, the legal pad pages, the late nights, the phone calls, the slow, methodical building of something from nothing, condensed into the clean, specific satisfaction of a target acquired. Good, she said. What happens now? Now we wait for the DOJ to respond. And now, Vivian said, I think someone else is going to have something to say about it first. Bernard Hale called Celine that same afternoon. He was a staff investigative journalist at the Atlanta Constitution Journal, and he spoke with the focused intensity of someone who had been following the Harlow Falls story since the edited body camera clip first circulated, and had been waiting for something real to break it open. He had independently obtained the DOJ filing through a court contact. He had already verified 2 of Celine's neighborhood witness accounts. He wanted Celine's statement on record. She gave it to him. Precise. Factual. Every word chosen carefully. His piece ran online the following morning. It was thorough and sourced, and it did not pull anything. It walked through the timeline from the original stop, through the refiled charges, through the earlier IA report and Voss's reclassification, and the direct line between Ryder's buried history and what had happened to Celine on Magnolia Ridge Drive. By midday, a cable news network had picked it up. Celine watched the segment on Hattie's television. A use of force expert, calm and authoritative, breaking down the body camera footage frame by frame on a split screen. He froze it at the exact moment Ryder's hand reached forward. He pointed to it with a laser marker. Contact is initiated by the officer, he said clearly, before any movement from the subject. Hattie, sitting beside Celine on the couch, said nothing. She just reached over and put her hand on Celine's arm. By the following morning, the Harlow Falls PD had announced that Officer Kane Ryder had been placed on administrative leave pending a departmental review. Voss released a written statement saying he welcomed independent oversight and remained committed to transparency. Chief Crow called a press conference. Celine watched it standing at the kitchen counter with her coffee. Crow was exceptional at press conferences. He wore his uniform with the quiet authority of a man who had earned it. He spoke about accountability with the measured cadence of someone who had practiced the speech. He announced the formation of an internal review panel. He said the words community and trust multiple times each. He looked directly into the cameras with the expression of a man who had nothing to hide. That man is buying time, Hattie said from the doorway. I know, Mama. Days later, the letter from the DOJ arrived in Vivian's email. Celine was sitting at the kitchen table when Vivian called. She knew from the first half-second of Vivian's silence what the answer was. They rejected it, Vivian said. Insufficient federal nexus. Same wall that stopped 100 cases before this one. A pause. I'm going to appeal. But Celine, the appeal timeline is months minimum. Celine wrote it down, circled it, set her pen down. The next blow came the same afternoon. A certified letter addressed to Celine personally, forwarded from Vivian's office. The Harlow Falls Police Officers Benevolent Association had filed a defamation lawsuit against her. The claim alleged that her public statements had caused measurable professional and emotional harm to Officer Kane Ryder. The filing was long. Vivienne called about it an hour later. "It's a pressure tactic," she said firmly. "Thin as paper. It'll get dismissed." She paused. "In months." The following morning, the department announced that Sergeant Reginald Voss had been reinstated from administrative leave after a short period. The internal review panel had found no basis for sustained action. Then Bernard Hale called. "I have a source inside City Hall," he said. His voice was different from his earlier calls, lower, more careful. "Crow is being considered for a state-level law enforcement appointment, a significant one. The governor's office." A pause. "The decision is soon. If he gets it, Celine, he's untouchable." "Yes." Celine stood at Hattie's kitchen window holding the phone. Outside, the small garden she had started planting the first week of her leave was coming in green and steady along the back fence. She had put those seeds in the ground on a quiet morning before any of this had happened. She stared at it for a long time without moving. Celine did not reach for her legal pad in the morning. She lay in the dark of Hattie's guest room and listened to the house. The refrigerator cycling on in the kitchen, a bird starting up outside the window, the particular early morning silence of a neighborhood that was still deciding whether to wake up. She stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then she got up, got dressed, and walked down the hall to her mother's room. "Mama," she said softly through the door. "Get up. We're going to church." Hattie did not ask any questions. She was ready in a short time. Church dress, good shoes, her small gold earrings that she only wore on Sundays and special occasions. She handed Celine a travel mug of coffee without a word, and they drove through the quiet Sunday morning streets of Harlow Falls, together with the gospel station playing low on the radio. The church was a short drive away. Red brick, white steeple. A parking lot that filled fast on Sunday mornings. Celine had been coming here since she was small, sitting between her parents in the third pew from the front, her feet not quite reaching the floor. Her father had been gone for years now. The pew was the same. She sat in it now. The choir opened with something slow and full, the kind of song that didn't ask anything of you, just moved through the room like warm air and let you feel whatever you were carrying without having to explain it to anyone. Celine did not sing along. She just sat. She let the music do what it was supposed to do. She did not think about Crow. She did not think about the governor's office, or the short window, or the defamation lawsuit sitting in Vivienne's file. She did not build arguments, or map strategies, or turn evidence over in her mind, looking for angles. She was simply her mother's daughter, sitting in the third pew. For one morning, that was enough. Hattie sang every word of every song with her eyes closed and her chin lifted slightly, the way she always had. At one point, she reached over without looking and put her hand over Celine's. Celine turned her palm up and held it. After the service, Hattie made Sunday dinner: baked chicken, rice, green beans with smoked turkey, cornbread in the cast-iron skillet that had been in the family longer than Celine had been alive. The kitchen filled with the kind of smell that reached back through your whole life and grabbed you somewhere deep. They ate at the kitchen table together without turning on the news, without opening a laptop, without mentioning Ryder, or Crow, or Vivienne, or the case at all. Hattie talked about Sister Pearl's new grandbaby, about the church's fall fundraiser, about a television program she had been watching about people who restored old houses. Celine ate and listened, and asked questions, and let herself be fully present in the ordinary, irreplaceable smallness of a Sunday afternoon with her mother. After she helped with the dishes, she called Amara. Her sister answered on the first ring, relieved to hear Celine's voice without the case briefing tension that had colored their last call. They talked for a long time about nothing important. Amara's kids, a co-worker situation, a trip Amara was planning. Celine laughed at something her sister said, and it surprised her. The laugh, real and unguarded, the kind that snuck up on you. When she hung up, she walked out into Hattie's backyard. The garden ran along the back fence, the one she had started planting the first week of her leave, before Magnolia Ridge Drive, before any of this. Small green shoots that had been pushing through the soil steadily, regardless of everything happening around them, indifferent to all of it, just doing the thing they were built to do. She stood there for a while in the late afternoon light, her arms loose at her sides, looking at what she had planted. Then she went back inside. She was at the kitchen table with her files open when her phone showed the voicemail notification. Hale. Left that afternoon while she was on the phone with Amara. She played it once. His voice was brief and direct. No preamble. Celine, stop waiting for the civilian system to solve this on its own. There's a federal angle here that nobody has pulled yet. Send me everything. The IA report. The reclassification timeline, the certifications, all of it. Tonight. She played it a second time. Then she set the phone down, pulled her files into a single organized stack, and opened her laptop. She worked through the night, organized, compiled, documented with the precision of someone who had been trained to present intelligence clearly enough that a decision-maker could act on it in under a few minutes. Late that night, she attached the complete package to a secure email and sent it to the address Hale had given her. Then she closed the laptop. Outside, Hattie's street was dark and still. The garden was invisible in the nighttime yard, but she knew it was there, pushing through the soil, doing what it was built to do. She went to bed. Days passed. Celine kept working. She and Vivian spoke every morning. Short, focused calls that covered what had moved and what hadn't. The appeal of the DOJ rejection was being drafted. The defamation lawsuit response was being prepared. The records motion was still buried under procedural weight, still buying Crow his months. The governor's appointment window was now shorter. Everything was moving. Nothing was moving fast enough. On the second morning, Celine was at the kitchen table with her coffee when her phone rang. Hale. She picked up before the second ring. Good morning, he said. His voice had a different quality than the voicemail. Settled. The voice of a man who had spent days reading carefully and had arrived somewhere specific. Tell me, Celine said. Hale laid it out methodically, the way he had always briefed. No unnecessary words. No dramatic pauses. Just the architecture of the thing built in front of you piece by piece until you could see exactly what it was. The Harlow Falls Police Department, he explained, received an annual federal grant through the Department of Justice's Community-Oriented Policing Services program, the COPS grant. It had been funding a portion of the department's community outreach operations for consecutive years. The amount was substantial, significant enough that losing it would create a genuine budget crisis for a department the size of Harlow Falls PD. As a condition of receiving that grant every year, the chief of the department was required to sign a federal certification, a formal legal document affirming that the department had no documented pattern of civil rights violations, and that all internal complaints had been properly reviewed and adjudicated through correct processes. Harlan Crow had signed that certification every single year for those consecutive years. Celine's hand tightened slightly around her pen. The earlier internal affairs report, Hale said, the one Croft filed and Voss buried. That report documented a specific verified pattern of racially disparate stops by Officer Ryder over a period of months. It was completed. It was signed. It was submitted through proper departmental channels. A pause. And then Voss reclassified it as unfounded, without proper authority days after his promotion was approved, and it disappeared. Celine was already writing. Crow signed the federal certification months after that reclassification. Hale continued. He certified to the United States government that his department had no documented pattern of civil rights violations, but the earlier IA report existed. It had been filed. It documented exactly that pattern. Crow signed a federal document saying otherwise. The kitchen was very quiet. That's not a civil rights complaint, Celine said slowly. No, Hale said. Is federal grant fraud. Materially false statements on a federal funding certification. That is an entirely different category of problem, with an entirely different set of consequences. He paused. I've already been in contact with the FBI Civil Rights Division's Atlanta field office through proper DOD to DOJ channels. I cited the documented federal funding nexus. They are opening an inquiry. Celine set her pen down. She had been building this case from the ground up for weeks. Witness accounts, document requests, legal filings, late nights at this table while the house slept. She had watched every move get absorbed and survived by a system that had decades of practice protecting itself. This was different. This didn't bounce off institutional walls. This went through them. Celine. Hale's voice was steady. You built the foundation. Everything I used came from what you sent me. The IA report, the reclassification dates, the certification records you pulled from the public filing database. You already had all of it. A brief pause. You just needed someone with the right vantage point to see what it added up to. Thank you, General, she said. Don't thank me yet. Get Vivian on the phone. She called Vivian before Hale had been off the line a minute. Vivian listened to the full briefing without speaking. Celine could hear her typing on the other end. Fast, deliberate keystrokes. Notes being made in real time. When Celine finished, Vivian was quiet for exactly a few seconds. Federal civil action, Vivian said. Not a civil rights complaint. A federal civil action anchored directly to the fraudulent grant certifications. Different jurisdiction, different evidentiary standard, different consequences. Her voice had the focused intensity of someone who could see the full shape of something clearly for the first time. This is the angle that doesn't bounce off. How fast can you file? Celine asked. I'm already pulling the framework, Vivian said. Give me a couple of days. Celine opened her legal pad to a clean page. At the top, she wrote one word. In clear, deliberate letters, federal. She underlined it twice. Then she circled it. Outside Hattie's kitchen window, the morning was bright and still. Days until the governor's appointment decision. Days until Vivian filed. For the first time in weeks, the timeline was moving in the right direction. Days after Hale made the call, 2 federal agents drove to a quiet street in a subdivision outside Harlow Falls. They arrived in the evening when the workday was over and the neighborhood was settling into its after-dinner routines. They drove an unmarked gray sedan. They parked at the curb and walked to the front door and knocked with the unhurried patience of people who were not in a hurry because they already knew what they needed to know. Julian Croft answered the door in a t-shirt and basketball shorts. Off duty. Behind him, through the hallway, the television was on low. The smell of something cooked recently. Garlic. Something warm. Still hung in the air. A pair of small women's shoes were by the door. He looked at the badges. He looked at the 2 agents. And something in his face. Not surprise exact, but the particular expression of someone who has been waiting for a knock they couldn't predict and somehow always knew was coming. Shifted quietly into place. My wife is home, he said. We can talk on the porch, the lead agent said. They already knew what his earlier report said. That was the first thing that registered. They weren't fishing. They weren't building from nothing and hoping he would fill gaps. They had the report. His report. The one he had filed years earlier through every correct channel. The one he had signed his name to and submitted with the specific faith of someone who still believed the system worked. And they had read it. All of it. "We're not here to pressure you," the lead agent said. She was calm and direct, her voice carrying the particular steadiness of someone trained to make difficult conversations feel navigable. "We're here because you have information relevant to a federal inquiry. What you do with that is your choice. Completely." Croft sat on his front step with his forearms on his knees and looked at the street in front of him. A neighbor's kid was riding a bike in slow loops under the streetlight at the end of the block. The evening was warm. Somewhere close, a television through an open window. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary evening. He thought about Magnolia Ridge Drive. He thought about Celine Vargas, face down on that asphalt in her white tank top and her pink running shoes, her braids spread out around her, the cuffs already on, and himself standing 2 feet away, doing the only thing he had trained himself to do when Ryder did what Ryder did. Look at the ground and say absolutely nothing. He had been doing that for years. He had done it when he filed the earlier report and watched it come back, stamped unfounded with Voss's signature on it. He had done it when Voss handed him the new assignment, Ryder's partner, with a look that didn't need words to carry its meaning. He had done it on the phone with Celine when she called and said, "I know what you saw on that street." And he had said, "I have a family," and hung up. He had a family. That was still true. He also had a conscience that had been charging interest on years of silence and was now collecting. "Tell me what I need to do," he said. He gave them everything. A sworn statement, formal and detailed, that took time to complete at his kitchen table while his wife, Maya, sat quietly in the living room and did not interrupt once. He authenticated his original earlier report in its unaltered form. Every page, every signature, confirmed by the officer who had written it. He described Voss's reclassification in specific terms, including a conversation in Voss's office he had never documented, but had never forgotten. He described the departmental culture he had observed over years, the patterns, the practices, the silent agreements that everybody understood and nobody said out loud. He described his assignment as Ryder's partner for what it was, not routine, not coincidental. A deliberate placement. Watch him and say nothing, or find out what happens to officers who don't know how to stay quiet. He described Magnolia Ridge Drive last. When he finished, the lead agent gathered the documents, thanked him, and told him what happened next. As they stood to leave, the agent paused at the door. "You did the right thing the first time," she said. "Years ago you did it correctly." Croft nodded once. He didn't say anything. He closed the door and stood in his hallway for a long moment. Vivienne called Celine that evening. Croft gave a full sworn statement, Vivienne said. Authenticated the earlier report, described the cover-up in detail, described the assignment as a silencing tactic. A pause. "Celine, this is the linchpin. This is what holds the entire federal civil action together." Celine sat at Hattie's kitchen table in the quiet house. She thought about a young officer sitting down at his desk and writing the truth carefully and correctly and watching it disappear into Voss's desk drawer. She opened her legal pad to the witness page. She wrote J. Croft at the very top, underlined it once. Bernard Hale called early the next morning. Celine was already at the table, coffee made, legal pad open, the same position she had occupied most mornings for the past weeks. She picked up on the first ring. "It's done," Hale said. "We've been working at it for days. I have 3 independent sources on the certification fraud, 2 corroborating the earlier IA report timeline, and Croft's sworn statement has been entered into federal court record, which makes it public." A brief pause. "I wanted to call you before it went live. It posts soon." Celine set her pen down. "How much of it?" "All of it," Hale said. "Every thread." She read it the moment the link came through. It ran long. The kind of piece that a newspaper only publishes when it is completely certain of every word. Hale had written it with the same methodical precision Celine had brought to her own documentation. He started at the beginning. Magnolia Ridge Drive. The stop. The edited body camera footage, and who had released it and when. The refiled charges. The records motion. The council resolution. The business cooperative's letter. Then he went deeper. The earlier internal affairs report. Its contents. Its filing date. Its author. Voss's reclassification signature, dated days after his promotion, was approved by Crow. A direct quote from a legal expert Hale had sourced independently. A reclassification of this nature, executed under these circumstances, without proper review board authorization, represents a fundamental corruption of the internal accountability process. Then the COPIS grant certifications. Years of signatures. Years of federal documents affirming no documented pattern of civil rights violations, while a completed signed internal affairs report, documenting exactly that pattern, sat buried in a departmental file. Then the defamation lawsuit. Hale had pulled the filing and had a civil litigation attorney walk through it on record. The attorney's assessment was 3 words: naked intimidation tactic. Then the governor's appointment. Hale had sources inside the state capitol confirming Crow had been actively lobbying for the position for months. One source provided an email. Hale quoted from it carefully. By midday, the wire services had it. By afternoon, it was national. Celine watched it move from Hattie's living room couch with her laptop open and her phone going steadily in her hand. Vivian calling. Hale's aide calling. Amara calling from Charlotte, with a voice that had completely changed from the frightened, uncertain tone of weeks ago. The first consequence arrived that afternoon. Vivian called. Her voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it. The specific, tightly held satisfaction of a person who has been building towards something for a very long time and is now watching it arrive. "Ryder is terminated," she said. "Effective today." The department released a 1-paragraph statement. Celine wrote it down. Hours later, Vivian called again. The Harlow Falls Police Officers Benevolent Association had quietly filed a withdrawal of the defamation lawsuit against Celine. No statement, no explanation. Just a withdrawal notice filed at the end of business, hoping the news cycle would be too loud for anyone to notice the sound of them backing down. Celine noticed. The following morning, Voss resigned. His statement cited a desire to spend more time with family. The phrase that had never once in history meant what it claimed to mean. By afternoon, the Georgia State Ethics Board had confirmed publicly that a formal investigation into his conduct had been opened. His pension, Vivian confirmed, had been placed under administrative hold. That same afternoon, Celine's phone showed a news alert. The governor's office had released a brief statement. The law enforcement appointment previously under consideration was no longer moving forward. No name was mentioned. No reason was given. The statement was short and had clearly been written by someone whose primary skill was saying nothing while appearing to say something. Crow had run out of road. Days later, Bernard Hale called one more time. "Federal agents were at Harlow Falls PD this morning," he said. "Document preservation order. I've confirmed it with 2 sources." A pause. Crow retained private counsel by end of business. Celine sat very still on Hattie's couch. She thought about the first morning. The patrol car rolling up alongside her on Magnolia Ridge Drive, slow and unhurried, like it had all the time in the world. Ryder's hand on his belt, the asphalt coming up fast. All that time, all that certainty. That evening, Hattie came and sat beside her at the kitchen table, while Celine read Hale's piece one more time. Hattie put her reading glasses on and read over Celine's shoulder, her lips moving slightly with certain sentences. The way she read things, she wanted to make sure she understood completely. When she reached the end, she took her glasses off. She set them carefully on the table. She looked at Celine. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The settlement signing was on a Friday morning. Vivian's office was on a high floor of a building in downtown Atlanta with wide windows that looked out over the city. Celine arrived early in her dress uniform, army greens, her commendations in their correct order on her chest, her rank insignia precise. She had not planned to wear it. She had stood in Hattie's guest room that morning, looking at her civilian clothes laid out on the bed. And then she had opened the closet and reached for the uniform instead. She didn't examine the decision too closely. It felt right. That was enough. Vivienne was already at the conference table when Celine walked in. She stood up, looked Celine over once from boots to beret, and said nothing for a moment. Then she smiled, small, real, the smile of someone who had been in this work long enough to know that moments like this one were rare. "Sit down," Vivian said. "Let's finish this." The terms were everything Vivian had demanded, and nothing less. A formal written apology to Major Selene Vargas from the city of Harlow Falls, signed by the mayor, entered into the public record, where it would stay permanently. Independent civilian oversight of the Harlow Falls Police Department for years, with quarterly public reporting requirements. A complete case-by-case review of every arrest made by Officer Kane Ryder during his full tenure. Every charge, every conviction, every person whose life his badge had touched. The immediate dismissal with prejudice of all charges against Celine, expunged completely from every record in which they appeared. And the financial settlement. Celine had told Vivian weeks ago what she intended to do with it. Vivian had not tried to talk her out of it. She understood, Celine thought, the particular kind of statement that was being made. Every dollar went to the Hattie Vargas Scholarship Fund, established in her mother's name, administered through an Atlanta-based nonprofit, designated specifically for young black women pursuing careers in public service or military service. The first round of applications had already opened. Vivian had seen to that. Celine signed her name at the bottom of each document in the same clean, deliberate hand she had used to sign orders and reports and commendations for years. When the last page was done, Vivian slid the pen back across the table and stacked the documents neatly and said, "It's over." Celine looked at the stack of papers. "No," she said quietly. "It started." Vivian looked at her for a moment. Then she nodded once. "Yes," she said. "That's right." She drove back to Harlow Falls in the afternoon light. Hattie was waiting on the porch when Celine pulled up. Had been waiting, Celine suspected, for most of the morning. She was in her good house dress with her small gold earrings in, and her hands folded in her lap. And when Celine came up the front walk still in her dress uniform, Hattie stood up slowly and put both hands over her mouth. Celine climbed the porch steps, and her mother pulled her into a hug that lasted a long time. Neither of them said anything for a while. Then Hattie said, against Celine's shoulder, "Your father would have been so proud." Celine held on a little tighter. Just for a moment. Just long enough. The next morning, she ran her route. Same time. Same white tank top. Black shorts. Pink running shoes. Braids loose. The morning heat already building, the way it always did, indifferent and steady. She turned onto Magnolia Ridge Drive and ran it at her regular pace, her breathing even, her footfall steady. Left, right, left. The same rhythm she had kept since she was young. She ran the full stretch of it, including the place on the road where the asphalt had a faint scuff mark she may have imagined. She ran it straight and level and did not slow down. Near the pale blue house with the white shutters, a woman in her early 60s was crouched along the front walk, deadheading roses with a small pair of garden shears. She looked up as Celine approached. Their eyes met. The woman straightened slowly. The shears hung at her side. She opened her mouth, closed it once, then said, "I should have come outside." Celine held her gaze. She thought about saying several things. She settled on the truest one. "Next time," Celine said. She kept running. Back at Hattie's kitchen, the morning light came through the window over the sink, the way it always did. Warm and unhurried, catching the dust in the air and making it look like something worth seeing. Hattie was at the table with her reading glasses on, and the Atlanta Constitution Journal open in front of her. Bernard Hale's follow-up profile. Celine had read it the night before. The headline read, "She kept her word." Hattie finished the last paragraph, took her glasses off, and set them on the table with the careful deliberateness of someone who needed a moment before they looked up. Then she looked up. She didn't say anything. She just looked at her daughter across the coffee cups and the morning light with an expression that held everything. The fear, the pride, the sleepless nights, the porch steps, the sweet tea, the church pew, all of it braided together into something that didn't need a single word to be completely understood. Celine poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of her mother, sat down. Her leave ended soon. She would go back to Fort Gilliam, back to her unit, her work, the life she had built with both hands. The scholarship fund had applications already. Vivian had sent the number that morning with a single exclamation point, which from Vivian was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Outside the kitchen window, the garden she had planted the first week of her leave, before Magnolia Ridge Drive, before any of it, was in full bloom along the back fence. Green and steady and completely unbothered. Just doing what it had always been going to do, given enough time and enough ground. Celine wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. Outside, the morning was ordinary and clear and entirely hers. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like to support my channel and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. On the screen, I have picked 2 special stories just for you. Have a wonderful day.